Good afternoon, everyone. I think we'll get started here. Welcome to the Moose Jaw Museum and Art Gallery Theatre for the very last noon hour slideshow of this season. My name is Michelle Carleen Gallagher, and today you're going to take a journey with me through the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. Before we do that, I would like to acknowledge that we are on treaty land, referred to as Treaty 4 territory, and that the city of Moose Jaw and all the people here are beneficiaries of this treaty. Treaty 4 encompasses the lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and is homeland to the Métis Nation. We respect and honor the treaties that were made on all territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we are committed to move forward in partnership with Indigenous nations in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So I thought I would throw in some maps today to kind of help you be oriented with where we are in the United Kingdom. So of course, this is Scotland, and the very top northern part is the Highlands. And then you can see to the top right is the Orkney Islands. And then if you keep going, the Shetlands, and then on the west coast, the Western Isles, or Outer Hebrides, they're sometimes called. So you can see here, I've circled and highlighted Perth. Perth is basically the gateway to the Highlands. And just to the right of that on the map is Dundee, which is where I lived for a couple of years while I was in Scotland. We're going to be heading from Perth a little bit up the east coast, more up the middle, way up to the top to the Orkneys, and then work our way down the west coast to the islands and the coastline. So Perth is actually a really pretty city. It's got the population of about the size of Regina, maybe a little smaller. This is the River Tay that flows through Perth. The Tay River is the longest river in Scotland, and it's actually right from Dundee to St. Andrews, and then you'll see it goes a little further as well. Perth often wins awards for its flowers and beautification of its town. So I had to include Scone Palace. It's just a little bit outside of Perth, and all of those pictures are of the Scone Palace. On the far left, with the sword sticking out of the stone, that stone is a replica of the Stone of Destiny. So I'm going to give you a tiny bit of history. Don't worry, I won't do this for the whole time. In 840 AD, the Scots and the Pictish kingdoms were united under Kenneth I, who was the 36th king of Dalriada. The capital of that kingdom was moved to Scone, and so the Stone of Destiny was moved as well. Scottish kings have been enthroned on the Stone of Destiny for centuries. And actually, King Charles III, at his recent coronation, was also, the Stone of Destiny was there. In 1296, the English King Edward I forcibly removed it to Westminster Abbey, London, after his Scottish victories. In November of 1996, 10,000 people lined Edinburgh's Royal Mile to witness its return to Scotland, and that's where it is today, in the castle. So on the top left, that is where it was in Westminster Abbey. Here's just some other views of Perth. The church in the middle, apparently there are only 3 churches with towers like that in all of Scotland. On the far right is what's called the Market Cross, and almost every town and village has one. I believe that one has the unicorn on the top of it, Scotland's national animal. A mythical beast, but still their national animal. This is called the Inch, and it's not far from my in-laws' house. My husband is from Perth, that's his hometown. So this is just kind of the tunnels onto the Inch. It's a really wide green space with parks and this pool. It's beautiful. The top right corner is the City Regina Pipe Band getting ready for the Perth Highland Games, probably circa 2006. And then the other picture was last summer. Some of my pipe band people were in Perth at the same time, but we weren't actually competing. Another shot of beautiful street in Perth. There's our River Tay again. Looks like I'm wearing a lot of Ryder and Canada gear, these pictures. So this is a beautiful walk, just crossing that bridge we just looked at and heading up into the Canoe Hill summit. And you can see a beautiful view of up into the Highlands, actually, right there. So there's the River Tay. And this was a bonny day, as they'd say in Scotland. Nay rain. And there's our church tower again. Some of the flowers. This memorial is to the 51st Highland Division, and it basically symbolizes the liberation of European allies from occupation. Also in Perth is the Black Watch Castle and Museum. The Black Watch was actually formed in the aftermath of the first Jacobite rebellion, which was in 1715. And it was made up of loyalist Highland clans who supported the actual King of England, whereas the Jacobites wanted the Stuarts back on the throne. This is the guidon, which is the battle honors of the Black Watch. So you can see some of the battles they were a part of. In 2016, the British government had an artist design this weeping window, it was called, and it was first shown at the Tower of London, and then it kind of moved around the United Kingdom. And so this was at the Black Watch Museum. Each of the poppies used represented the life of a British or a Commonwealth soldier who died in the First World War. All of these poppies are now at the Imperial War Museum in London, and you can actually purchase them if you like. And on the far left, that's my father-in-law and my husband, and me being silly. Feather bonnets and all. So Forfar is a tiny hamlet. I really blew this map up just to kind of show where the Aberlumno standing stones are. These standing stones date to AD 500 to 800. The history of these is just incredible. You're going to see the Highlands are full of standing stones and ancient cairns and things like that. And so we will be focusing a lot on these. You can see how tall they are. So this was actually 1999 or 2001, it looks like. And that is twice my height at least. And just the intricate details. So they usually told a story. And if we had lots of time, I'm sure I could have researched this for you, but I just think it's cool to see. This one would have been a battle scene. And some of them are just left out in the elements, and some they take into churches to protect them. Okay, we're making our way up the East Coast, and just off the map on the bottom would have been Dundee. And then we're heading up the coast towards Lunan Bay Beach. And I wanted to show you this. This wouldn't probably be considered Highlands, but Scotland has some incredible beaches, and you just wouldn't even believe it. And look at that, not a soul on the beach. Probably because the water is super cold. And it was really rainy about an hour before this picture was taken. But it's just stunning. There you can see we have our hoods up. So it does rain in Scotland. On the top right is Red Castle. It's a 12th century ruin of a castle at Lunan Bay. I like to take pictures of, well, almost anything. I know a lot of you follow my Facebook Waccamaw walks, so you're quite aware that I like flora and fauna. So here's a little bit found on the beach. Just the atmosphere with the clouds and the sand, and not a person. So when the sun came out, so did the people. Okay, so from still going up the East Coast, and then we're going to make our way back to the middle. We're heading to Stonehaven and then Dunnottar Castle. So Stonehaven is basically a little fishing village on the East Coast. Really pretty. Tons of seagulls. You don't want to be holding your chips and fish anywhere near those seagulls because they will take them out of your hand. I've seen it happen. There's a little bit of the harbor. Now, Dunnottar Castle looks like it's in the middle of the water, but there's actually a path from land to walk there. You can kind of just see it coming down from the top. It's quite atmospheric and I would think pretty impenetrable when it was up and running. So I kind of like to throw these in because one was like 2000 and the other one was like 2018. The castle hasn't changed, but I think I have a little. Or not. Yeah, you can just see the size of the cliffs there. Okay, we're now going to head kind of up the middle of Scotland. You can see the A9 is one of the major motorways, Dunkeld on the right and the Hermitage on the left. And you can see that's still the River Tay that's flowing there on the left of the motorway. This Hermitage was actually, the forest was designed as an 18th century pleasure ground for the Duke of Atholl. You know, people have money when they design a forest for themselves. It's a nice little walk, not far from the town of Dunkeld. So on the far left is the market cross of Dunkeld and the cathedral. And there's our River Tay again. So now we're heading to the Scottish Crannog Centre, Loch Tay again. And a crannog dates back to the late Bronze Age, if you can imagine. Now this isn't the original. They had to rebuild it, but they found evidence that there was one right here on Loch Tay. That's Ben Lawyers and with snow in the distance. This was winter in Scotland. You can see the water doesn't freeze. Very pretty area. There's a better view of the Crannog. So they would have their livestock living in there with them, which would have helped keep it warm. The thatched roof and over the water, safe from anyone else. So now we're heading up the A9 again, heading north towards Inverness and the Falls of the Brewer. This is a real tourist area that you can get lunch. You can do some really expensive shopping. They have kind of designer stuff there. And most people just use it as a break from driving on the A9, especially in the summer, because there's tons of caravans and it's really super busy. Just when you leave the car park, you can see this tribute to the Highland regiments. You'll see I probably have a lot of pipers as well. For those of you who don't know, I play the bagpipes, so pretty fascinated with Scotland and its history and piping, of course. So this is one of the forest walks to the falls, the actual waterfalls of Brewer. You can see Andrew in the top right. We just stopped to have our lunch. We didn't pay from the cafeteria. We brought our packed lunch. Teachers. You can see the water is quite brown, and that's not because it's dirty. It's that the soil is very peaty. And so the peat kind of washes out into the water. It's just stunning. We got some pretty good days for traveling, actually, when I look at these pictures. So there's Inverness circled, and then you can see the Bewley Firth into the Moray, Bewley Firth into the Moray Firth. We're going to go to the far right, Cawdor, and then the Clavicairns and Culloden. Cawdor Castle is still owned by the Cawdor family, and it dates back to the 14th century. It was built as a private fortress by the Thanes of Cawdor. And I know a lot of you out there are going, I've heard of the Thanes of Cawdor. Yes, Shakespeare's Macbeth was based on a lot of the history from here. Legend has it that the Thane of Cotter received instructions in a dream. He loaded gold on the back of a donkey and let it roam, and wherever this donkey was to lay its head, the castle should be built there. And there is a tree, I don't have a picture of it, but there is a tree in the basement of the castle that was apparently the tree, it's now petrified, that the donkey laid its head on, if you believe these legends. But really cool when the castles are actually lived in and furnished and you get to see what they look like. I always think the beds are super short, but then so are the doorways. So I don't think the Scots were super tall back in the day. The gardens of the castles are also pretty incredible. You could spend an entire day at Cotter Castle. Okay, working our way back towards Inverness, the Clava Cairns. So we've got the Healing Coos in the top right. And the Clava Cairns date to about 4,000 years ago, a Bronze Age cemetery. So there's a ring of cairns, passage graves, and a stone circle. And they think that there's only room for 2 people in these grave sites. So historians believe that they were for really important people. You can see some of the standing stones here. And this is the battlegrounds of the Battle of Culloden. Of course, in April 16th, 1746, the Jacobite supporters, wanting to restore the Stuarts to the throne, fought the Duke of Cumberland's troops. 1,600 men were slain on this battlefield. 1,500 of them were Jacobites. So it was a big slaughter of the Highlanders. This was in 1999, this picture. It hasn't changed much, except that they've really done up the visitor center, and there's a museum there now that wasn't there back then. But you can see this wasn't a great place to have a battle. There's no high ground. It's very boggy and wet, especially in April. This was when my mom and dad and my cousin Jamie came to visit when I was teaching in Scotland. Same kind of day, actually, a little gray. It has a feeling to it, this battlefield. If you've ever been to Vimy Ridge in France as well, I feel there's a feeling to them. There's the heather on the left. So there are clan stones for each of the clans, and the one on the far left is the only one for the English. That just shows you where the 2 lines were set up. So I kind of skipped over Inverness, being a big city, and was just kind of sticking to other places around there. We're going to stop up here at Fort George. And it was built in 1746. And it was because of the Jacobite Rising, but of course it took 22 years to build. And so it did not have anything to do with the Jacobite Rising. It is 5 football pitches enclosed within a gated fence. And it also encloses the history of the Highland regiments as well. My dad was artillery, and so he at length explained how the guns worked for us. You'll see this picture. Jamie is trying not to laugh. Finger in the hole, fire. I like this shot. Dad just poking over the wall. And that was the museum curator right there. So that kind of gives you an idea of how vast this fort was. So we're now going to head our way up north to the northern peninsula. And you're going to see, I think it reminds me of Saskatchewan. It's not as flat, of course, as we are around Moose Jaw. I think this bridge reminds me of sailboats, and I'm not sure if that's what they were trying to show us, but I guess here's what I was thinking with the the land being somewhat flat and agricultural based for sure. Except it's surrounded by water. This is actually my brother-in-law's field of wheat. He farms in a place called Balaldi, not far from Farron and Tain, which we already saw. And there's a flax field that we passed. I was like, oh, it feels like Saskatchewan. Except they have things like this. The Tarbet Discovery Center is in an ancient church called St. Coleman. And most of these stones and slabs are Pictish and from about 1200 years ago. This is pronounced Port Mahomet. And you can see on the sign to the right, the Gallagher is at the top. This is a beautiful fishing village. Every year we go to the farm, we take some time and spend it in Port Mahomet. There's lots of walks along the cliff edge and the beaches. A little windy that day, or maybe just my new hair. We didn't actually build these stone cairns, they were there. I'm getting better at just taking pictures of really nice rocks. I don't take them home anymore because you're not supposed to do that. So you can see clear across, this is the Murray Firth, I'm not sure. No, the Cromarty Firth. So we're on the Tarbet Ness Peninsula. Oh, I guess that would be the Dornoch Firth, there you go. And so that's the Tarbet Ness Lighthouse. We just happened to catch a deer on our way through. Very rocky coastline. I've not been to the Maritimes yet. It's on my list, but I think it probably looks much like this. It's very stunning. And the heather, love the heather. And you can't visit Scotland without visiting a distillery. So this is Glenmorangie. That's how the Scots pronounce it. Fealty is welcome in Gaelic. We don't have any pictures of the actual distillery because they frown on that. They don't want anyone taking any ideas from their whiskey. So now we're heading up north towards Dunrobin Castle. This castle is home to the Earls and Dukes of Sutherland and has been that way since the 13th century. Dunrobin in Gaelic means Robin's Hill or fort in Gaelic. And they think it was named after Robert VI, Earl of Sutherland. It was completely remodeled in 1845 into a house from a castle. And then unfortunately in 1915, there was a big fire and they had to redo the interior. It was very beautiful. Again, you could spend an entire day here. The size of the plants always blows me away. You can even see the hosta in the middle of that. And the rhubarb. I think it's ornamental. Yeah, these gardens are pretty beautiful. And that was my first trip to Dunrobin Castle. I think that was 1999. And anywhere up north, you were not very far from the water, just kind of a stone's throw. Some more standing stones with a story to tell. You can just see on the one behind me there that there is a carving of a cross, but it's kind of worn away and lichen. This is St. Demhan's cross. Early Christian. That is Scotland to me right there. Very atmospheric. Kind of, they call it a Dreich day. It's kind of rainy. And another beautiful beach. Gulfsby is a tiny village along there. So now we're going to head right to the tip of this peninsula to John O'Groats. Kind of looks like pencil crayons, really. So this was 1987, the year I graduated from high school. Yikes. Doesn't seem that long ago, but it was. They used to have somebody there who would, if you paid so much, they would take your picture and you could put your city up. So Moose Jaw was 4,600 miles away, and that's my friend Graham that I met in the hostel, and he's from, or was from Dunedin, New Zealand. He's now in Christchurch. And this is today. So it's not quite as fun when you can't put your city up. And I love puffins, so if there's a puffin, there's a picture of me with it, even if it's not real. So they call John O'Groats the first and last of Scotland. So from here, we're going to take a ferry over to the Orkney Islands. And it's pretty pricey now. Back in 2000, it wasn't too bad, but we went to do it a couple of years ago and went, oh, we better save a little more money for that. This is the Old Man of Hoy. That's what they call the rock formation behind me. You can tell some of my pictures are quite old, and they're a little bit grainy. So the Orkney Islands are full of ancient stones and incredible things to see. We're going to start at the Italian chapel. Now, you might think, why is there an Italian chapel in the Orkney Islands? Well, it was built by World War II Italian prisoners of war. They had been captured in North Africa, and Churchill was worried about the war and the protection of the north of Scotland, and so he brought these prisoners of war here. Some had to build the church, and some were trying to build protection within the water. And one of them was an artist, and he did the interior. Quite a rugged coastline. I don't know if this is even open today. So you had to get on this little kind of dolly and wheel yourself in to one of these ancient burial chambers. Probably the most famous one is this one, Maze Howe. It's over 5,000 years old. There's a 10-meter long narrow passageway here that you can see. On either side is made with one large sandstone slab. Each of those slabs weighs 3 tons. I'd have no idea how they did these things. There you can see kind of a diagram of what it would have looked like, and then the central chamber. And then right in the middle of that photo is one of the standing stones that they used to prop up in the corners. And that's the way out. You kind of have to duck to get in and out. In the 12th century, you can see here, there's some runic graffiti. Not kind of what we see as graffiti today. Norsemen, who were descendants of the Vikings, broke into the Maze Howe and left this graffiti there. And Orkney was under Norwegian rule until 1468. So here's one of the stone circles that we're going to see today, stones of Stennis. This is one of the earlier ones you're going to find. It was built about 5,400 years ago, and it's dated to around 3,100, 2,900 BCE. Massive. The Ring of Brodgar is dated to the 3rd millennium BCE, and it used to consist of 60 stones, and there's 36 that survive today. I couldn't get an aerial photo, so I hope Wayne Hutchinson doesn't mind that borrowed his. There's mine. It's pretty grainy. That's what it'd be like in the spring with the heather. Skara Brae is a prehistoric village, and it predates the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge. It was uncovered by a storm in 1850. So it's basically a stone-built Neolithic settlement. Kind of see the diagram here. I borrowed the next picture as well, just so you could get a better view of what it looks like. Each house is 40 square meters, and it's filled with stone furniture, like dressers and boxer beds. So this is my photo. So cool. And the hearth is in the middle there. Likely would have had a thatched roof. And they're so close to the water. I can imagine it was pretty windy and cold. Kirkwall is one of the most populated towns on the islands. Love the architecture there. And these are just dotted all over. You just drive anywhere and you're going to find summer. I kind of included this because I was waiting to hear from my brother because my first niece was ready to be born. And this was, I've had to phone from a payphone. And it's just sitting in the middle of nowhere, this payphone. And she hadn't been born yet. It was 2 days later. So now we're coming back down from the Orkney Islands and down from Inverness and heading along the west coast. And just below Inverness is a tiny village called Drumnadrochit. And along Drumnadrochit is the Loch Ness. So I'm pretty sure everyone's heard of the Loch Ness Monster. And that is Loch Ness. And that is Urquhart Castle. Castle ruins, it's changed as well today. They have big gift shops and cafes and and it's really hard to get into that castle because there's so many tourist buses. Very picturesque on the walk. So the next probably 10 slides are just of the scenery in the Highlands, making your way back along the west coast. It's just beautiful. And our next visit is Eilean Donan Castle. And this castle is likely the most photographed castle of all time. You've probably seen it in a few movies or at least when they show Scotland, they often show this castle. It's kind of on its own island. Some of the movies that use this castle were Highlander, the original, with Christopher Lambert. The World Is Not Enough, a James Bond movie, and more recently, Maid of Honor, with Patrick Dempsey from Grey's Anatomy. So it really changes its look depending on whether it's low or high tide as well. I love how plants can grow out of anything. It's a 13th century castle, and it was originally built as protection against Viking raids. It was partially destroyed in 1719 in the First Jacobite Rising. And then in 1911, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae Gilstrap, not the author of In Flanders Fields, bought that island. From Eilean Donan, we're going to head to the Isle of Skye on the west coast here. So these pictures are 1987. That's why they're so grainy. It was a disc camera, I believe. All three of us, that's my friend Carla from Saskatoon, were too young to rent a car, so we had bikes. So we cycled through. Portree is the main settlement on Skye, one of the main settlements. It's colored houses. There's a Portree Harbor. And the hills on the left are called the Coolin Hills. And you'll see these black houses everywhere, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. A little bit more of the Coolins and the coastline. And you'll recognize this near the end. It looks a lot like Fingal's Cave and the Giant's Causeway from Northern Ireland. probably the biggest castle in Skye, Dunvegan. The cross on the left is a monument to Flora MacDonald, who is said to have helped Bonnie Prince Charlie escape after the massacre at Culloden. And these are some university students from Aberdeen who gave us a lift to the mainland, because back in 1987, there was not a ferry, or there was only a ferry to Skye. Now there is a bridge, so it's quite a busy place now. So I've circled on the top left, the Outer Hebrides or Western Isles of Lewis and Harris. That's where we're headed next. And we'll have a look at the Black Houses villages. I found these places stunning. And again, there was nobody there. This was late August after the World's Pipe Band Championships. And I went with my friend Graham, who played in the band with me. And it's like we had the island to ourselves. Standing stones everywhere. There's Graham in the bottom right. And sheep, lots of sheep, more sheep than people. Graham brought us small pipes, so we played pipes wherever we were. These are the Callanish standing stones. And they're dated to between 2900 and 2600 BCE. They predate Stonehenge as well. Now, if you go to Stonehenge, and I'm sure some of you have been there, there's people everywhere, like it's odd. And there's like no one, just me, Graham and I. If any of you are Outlander fans or have read Diana Gabaldon's books, I think I was maybe trying to go back 200 years in history. Standing stone there. Top left is a big pile of peat. I know you're thinking I was going to say something else, but it's peat. Peat is what they use for their fires. It's dug right out of the soil. They just dig the chunks out and put them in the black houses. You'll notice the tops of the houses do not have chimneys. They just let the smoke go everywhere within the house. And the reason being, it kept the midges and all the other insects away. Midges are like super annoying, tiny bugs, worse than mosquitoes almost. They also would have kept their livestock in the house with them to help keep them warm. You can see how short the doorways are. Graham's like 6'2" probably. And that was a postcard I had. That one has a chimney. Most of them didn't have a chimney. That might be a more modern version. In the Nagaranen, you can now actually stay in a black house. And so that's probably why they have chimneys, because they know that the air quality wouldn't be good enough. St. Clement's Church. And sheep waiting for a bus. And just shows you how isolated some people would be in the Western Hebrides. Just a beautiful place to play bagpipes, or anything for that matter. Not a soul on the beach with us. McLeod Stone. Oh, there's 2 people on the beach. And then just so you know, it doesn't always have sunny days in Scotland. I had to throw this in. It was just pouring. There's no way you'd want to be out on a boat that day. We're going to continue down the west coast. And we're heading to the Commando Memorial at Spian Bridge. So again, this was when my parents were over in 2000. The Commando Memorial was created for the elite unit that was made in 1940 in the Second World War. They're known as the Green Berets. They fought in every theater of the war. And there were 38 battle honors, including 8 Victoria Crosses won by the commandos. Unfortunately, 1,700 were lost. over the years, different people would come visit while we're in Scotland, and that's, some of you may know, that's Patricia Schultz McRae now, and her husband Todd. Fort William is the end of the route called the West Highland Way that you can walk from Glasgow to Fort William, and it's right through the Highlands. It's stunning. I have not done that walk. And again, plants. And of course, mountains. Some of the accommodations. You have to really book ahead if you're going to Fort William, because it fills up pretty fast. It's a popular destination. Last summer, every summer we go over to see my in-laws and we try to do something different. And last year we took the steam train to Mallaig. They call it the Jacobite steam train. And again, we had to book these tickets like a year in advance. See the smoke billowing out. I had not been on a steam train before, so it was cool. You go right over the Glenfinnan Viaduct. For Harry Potter fans out there, this was used, you see this in the movie a lot. Or the movies, I should say. One of the stops from the train is the Glenfinnan Monument. We didn't get off that day because these pictures are from previous trips. There's a memorial here to the Highlanders that you can see in the middle, overlooking Loch Shiel. It was in this spot that 1,200 Highlanders gathered 8 months before the Battle of Culloden to pledge their allegiance to Bonnie Prince Charlie. The monument itself was built in 1815 and is 18 meters high. So Mom and Jamie and I climbed the tower. That's my friend Jody from Regina. And Pat and Todd again. Close up of our Highlander. Love the look on Todd's face. He kills me. And that's Bonnie Loch Shiel. So some of these pictures are from the train. So you can see it was a very wet day. And this is said to be Dumbledore's Island. So it was featured in one of the movies. And we made it to Mallaig Harbor. We were supposed to do a wildlife cruise that day, but the weather was too choppy. It looks fine in the harbor, but it was not good enough, so they canceled the trip. And there are a few more from the train. This next picture, you're gonna go, why would she include that? It's horrendous. But that's because if you are a Harry Potter fan, it looks just like the Dementors entered the train. So continuing down the west coast, we're heading to Glencoe, and that's Loch Leven. This is the pretty village of Glencoe. You can just see the path of Glencoe in the distance. Jamie's laughing there. In 1692, there was a massacre. Clan Campbell massacred the MacDonalds. It had to do with the first Jacobite rising, and oh, no, it didn't. I am wrong. Just after, looks like. There's the path of Glencoe. Lots of beautiful walks through the forest here. Oban is also a very popular tourist destination and is more so now. This was 2006. The pipe band had 1 day off where we didn't have to practice before the World's Championships. That was my friend Chris in the band. So we decided to go to Oban, but we had no accommodation. And when we got there, there was no accommodation. So we ended up sleeping in a field with midgies. I had a towel and the guys didn't have anything, so we put the towel down and slept like little bugs with our jackets on. It was not a good sleep, but a cool experience. And Alex wrote a tune called Three Spoons in a Field. If I had a copy of it, we would hear it today, but so that's Alex there. He actually plays with Scott Benson in the West of Mabu band. McKeag's Tower is a huge landmark in Oban, and it was created by McKeag family, basically as a make-work project for masoners out of work. A little bit like our stone wall around Crescent Park. So one of these, the middle picture is me in 2000 and then 2006. And then 2018 probably. It's very pretty, Oban. And from Oban, you can take the ferry to Mull. And because you still have to take a ferry, it's not as congested. So we're gonna head Caledonian McBrain ferry over to the island of Mull. And it just shows the cars loading. Another furnished castle. And the Helicos. Again, just full of beautiful beaches. It was a little rocky, but still gorgeous. I couldn't find anything out about this totem pole, but I thought it was pretty cool to find a totem pole on the Isle of Mull, so I don't know the history behind it. And you'll see this long road and no cars on it. Sometimes you feel like you have the whole island to yourself. And this guest house had a standing stone just in its driveway. Peaceful waters. And again, sheep. Every island has tons of sheep. Tobermory reminds me a little bit of Portree, but a bigger harbor and more colorful houses, really. I threw that in because I wondered if Calgary, Canada, was named after someone who used to live here. It's one of the bigger settlements on Mull. I love this. Well-behaved children welcome. The rest will be made into pies. Just joking. Or are we? And again, the standing stones. Quite fascinating. I did not see otters, but I love that there's no people, but cows, sheep, and possibly otters. We're getting near the end of our journey today. So we're gonna head from Fionport over to Iona. We did not take a car because you can just walk to the Abbey of Iona from where the ferry drops you off. It's just a short ferry ride. You can see it from Fionport. Iona is actually the birthplace of Christianity in Scotland. Columba brought pilgrims over in the 7th century from Ireland. It's not a big journey from Ireland to this island here. This is a 13th century abbey, and it's actually built on the site of Columba's original church, but that is no longer there. And there's an example of the standing stones being brought inside. I love the carvings along this corridor here. Face, and there's different every single pillar had something different on it. And the courtyard in the middle. The one on the far right has hands. And the Scottish does. They actually don't look real, but they were. And another beautiful beach. And there's the whole abbey from the water. We're going to end our journey by taking a tinier boat, even from Fionport to Fingal's Cave. This was a postcard that I purchased in 1999. I don't know why I hang on to these things, but there's a legend that goes with Fingal's Cave. There were apparently two giants, Fingal, who's actually the Irish giant, and if you were to head across the water to Ireland, Northern Ireland, you'd be at the Giant's Causeway. And it looks very similar to this with the basalt columns. So Fingal was the Irish giant and Benandonner was the Scottish giant. And apparently Benandonner was much larger. And they were challenging each other to a duel. So they built the Giant's Causeway from Ireland to Scotland. And Benandorn arrived and Fingal was terrified. And his wife said, "Don't worry, I got this." And so she put him in baby's clothes and put him in a pram. And then when she invited Benandonner in and he saw this was their baby, he was terrified to meet her husband. And so he fled back to Scotland, destroying the Giant's Causeway as he went. And this is all that remains. And that's my presentation on the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for coming.